Hello, friends. My name's Sam. I'm the student ministry pastor at Calvary's Roseville campus, and I'm excited to talk to you tonight. I wanted to introduce you to also my son, Wesley. Wesley's awesome, and if you ask Wesley, he will tell you that my phone has one purpose. It is to listen to kids' music, like Wheels on a Bus, Baby Shark, lots of dinosaur songs, some songs about trucks, lots of animal songs. Whatever it is, like the purpose of my phone is solely to listen to those kind of songs. Now, of course, he's not right. Like my phone also can turn your head into the head of an animal. Um, and that's the other purpose of my phone. Those two things are the only reason that I own a phone. And if you own a phone, phones do a lot more than just those two things. It would be silly to say, no, these are just the two ways that a phone can be used. But sometimes I think that we think of ourselves in that single purpose sort of way. And that would be crazy, though. It would be crazy to believe that a person had just one purpose, that they were made for just one thing. And it would be even crazier to say that that one thing is sex. Now, that's what we've been talking about these last few weeks, sex. And here's the deal. I don't think any of you believe that people were made for sex and sex alone. Like, that's crazy. But sometimes in the world we live in, that's the message that we get. We seem to hear all the time, you are just made for sex. And let me explain a little bit. Sometimes our thought lives can be consumed by passionate or lustful or romantic ideas that seem to make sex the most important thing. Sometimes the things we do or say can make it seem like sex or looking good or the things around sexuality are the most important things. It's like our pursuit of sex becomes most important, and that's a problem, especially when it becomes even more important than our relationship with God. These past couple of weeks, we've been talking about sex. We've been talking about how, hey, people are more valuable. They're not supposed to be things. We've said, hey, sex is a good thing to hold on to until marriage, and there's some reasons why that's true, why sex before marriage is not helpful to our lives or our future. We don't want people to be objectified. We said some really good things, and this week we're going to wrap things up, and I want to share just one more message. Here's what I want to talk about today, that we were made for more than sex. There's a lot of messages out there about sex. There's a lot of things we hear, and we've talked about some of them, and maybe some of the phony messages out there are easier to spot than others, but I want to just say a few of them. Here's a few messages that we hear out in the world about sex. You ready? First, if you have sex with someone, that will basically guarantee your future together. Not a great message. Basically, sex will help you not break up. Here's another one. If you want to have sex, it'll keep the other person from cheating on you. It'll bind you together in a special way that'll just keep you together. Or how about this one? Sex is how you communicate how much you care about someone. I mean, when we're watching TV shows and stuff, if they really love each other, things are really going well, then the ultimate thing they can do is have sex. That happens all the time in TV shows. Or what about this? Sex makes you a man or a woman, so you're not just a kid anymore. Like it helps you be an adult. Years ago, there was a movie that came out called 40-Year-Old Virgin, and there's a super innocent, kind of didn't really know what was going on guy who just had never had sex, and so therefore he seemed less mature and less knowledgeable than others, and it was kind of a joke because they had this idea like, hey, if you haven't had sex, you're not really an adult. Here's a message: if someone wants to have sex with you and you agree, you'll feel valued and better about yourself. That's a message we hear. Okay, if you wait until marriage to have sex, then everything will be perfect. Well, that's kind of on the opposite side of things. Everything about your marriage, your sex life, everything's going to be perfect. That's a message we hear. Sex is the reason you get married. Interesting, it's the reason you get married. Maybe you decide to wait, but now you just can't wait anymore, so that's a good reason to get married. And then one more message: sex is for marriage, which actually I would agree with. But even within that message, there's some sub-messages that may not be as helpful, like everything but actual sex before marriage is fine. Or obsessing about sex, as long as you don't have sex, is fine. Or if you have had sex before marriage, then you've ruined it. There's nothing you can do. Or following the rules of sex, of no sex before marriage, if you follow the rules, means there's no rules after you get married. There's a lot of messages out there about what sex is and how we use sex and what it means to us, and not all of them are helpful. In fact, most of them are not. My point is, you're getting a lot of messages about sex from all over the place: social media, TV shows, movies. the news, your friends, there's a lot of messages about sex. And a lot of them aren't true. A lot of them, even if they're given with great intentions, it doesn't make them true. And a lot of those untrue messages all boil down to one big idea that sex is everything. The problem with thinking that way, the problem with believing that sex can do all these things in our lives, is that we inflate sex into this thing that it was never meant to be. We make it into a god. Now, I know that is kind of dramatic, like, whoa, Sam, no one's saying sex is a god. But when we take something that was created and we put extra meaning into it and we inflate it, that's idolatry. That's making it a god. We're giving it more power than it was meant to have. And idolatry is taking anything, even a good thing, and making it an ultimate thing. Like when you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you think that's going to make you feel valuable, or having a car will make you feel important, or how you look determines how important or worthwhile you are. Have boyfriends and girlfriends, cars, looks, not bad things. But again, if we make them ultimate things, that's where the problem is. Just to be clear, sex is important. Sex does matter. It has its place. It's a lot of things. It's complicated. We've been talking about it for 4 weeks and I think have barely scratched the surface, but it's not the most important thing. Your relationship with God, that is the most important thing. So today, I want to talk to you about a family who lived 2,000 years ago, and I get that maybe talking about an ancient family doesn't feel like the most relevant thing to your current life. However, I think that this story gets at the idea that, hey, sex has been around for a long time, and it's been making things complicated sometimes for a long time, especially when it's mishandled. And so there's some timeless things that we can learn and know. So we're going to read a story about this guy named Joseph and some things revolving around his story. As we pick up this story, Jacob has just done this thing. He has stolen his brother's birthright, and it's a blessing that he took. And without getting into details, let me just tell you, it's a big deal. His brother wants to kill him, so he's fleeing away to his relative's house far away. And here's what happens.
After running away from Esau because he tricked him out of his father's blessing, Jacob ran to his uncle Laban's house. He stayed with Laban for a month and worked for him, taking care of his animals. Laban wanted to pay Jacob for his work, so he asked Jacob what he wanted. Jacob asked to marry Laban's younger daughter, Rachel. She was beautiful, and Jacob loved her. Laban said that if Jacob worked for him for 7 years, he could marry Rachel. So Jacob worked for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 whole years. But they seemed like a few days because he loved Rachel so much. The morning after his wedding, Jacob woke up next to, not Rachel, but her sister Leah. Laban had tricked Jacob into unknowingly marrying Leah. He did that because he wanted his older daughter to be married first. Jacob was furious with Laban. Laban told Jacob he could marry Rachel too, if he waited 1 week and also worked another 7 years. And so Jacob did. He waited a week and married Rachel, even though a man should only have one wife. And he worked for Laban for another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 whole years.
First of all, worst prank ever, right? I mean, switching brides, that sounds like a TV show. I mean, this sounds more like The Bachelor than the Bible. But Jacob works 7 years, and he's tricked into marrying Leah. Then he marries Rachel right after that and works another 7 years. But here's the problem. Beyond the fact that, he married sisters, not something I would recommend for your family plan. Here's a problem that comes up after they get married. In Genesis 30, verse 1, it says, when Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister Leah, who was having children, and she pleaded with Jacob, give me children or I'll die, which is a little dramatic. But actually, in that time, having children was a really big deal. It was huge. Children carry on the family line, especially having sons. And so women really wanted to have sons, and Rachel wasn't having sons. To make matters worse, her older sister was just cranking out sons, one after the other. But the problem for Leah is that she felt like she was married to someone who did not love her. In fact, she starts naming her kids after her unhappiness. Here's what it says in Genesis 29, 32 through 34. It says, she named her son Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me." She soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son. She named him Simeon, and she said, "The Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son." Then she became pregnant a third time and gave birth to another son. He was named Levi, for she said, "Surely this time my husband will feel affection for me. I have given him 3 sons." I mean, you see what's happening here? Each person is focusing all their attention and pursuit on one thing, and that thing isn't God. All Jacob wanted was for Rachel, Like, he wanted to marry her. He thought that marrying her would make him happy. And so he worked 14 years so that he could be married to her. And all Rachel wanted was sons. She thought that sons would make her happy. And that's what she wanted and desperately just prayed for. And every son that Leah, her sister, had was like a knife in her back. Like, I mean, it was a reminder of what Rachel could not do. And then Leah, she wanted Jacob's love. She was married to this guy who she felt did not love her. She obviously wanted that to be known by the way that she named her sons and the proclamation she made when each one was born. Maybe my husband will love me. This is about 3 people who wanted 3 different things. And they were willing to give up years of their lives and invest their attention into these things. And oddly enough, all those things were connected in some way to sex. I mean, Jacob wanted to have sex with Rachel. And Rachel wanted to have sex with Jacob so that Jacob could give her children. And Leah just wanted the person she was having sex with to care about her, to love her. All of them wanted something connected to sex that they thought would make them happy. And I think they were creating some idols in their minds. That's what happens when we make those good things into ultimate things. They replace God's place in our lives. Those things they were chasing did not deliver what they wanted. And in the same way, sex doesn't typically deliver the things that we want. See, people have believed unhealthy and untrue things about sex for a really long time. We're not the first people to make stuff up about sex and think sex can do things in our lives that it can't do. Sure, sex may momentarily make us feel better, maybe for a moment, but it can't be a cure. It can't be a long-term solution because sex wasn't made to be that. Neither was marriage or love or children. And maybe you found yourself believing something about sex or about desire or about romantic relationships that just is not what they were made for. They weren't made to fill our deepest longings, our biggest needs. Here's why we're talking about this, because I actually think that that's a good thing to know. It's a good thing. Way back in the beginning of this, when we first started this lesson, one of the verses we brought up was Psalm 139:14. It says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." It means that you don't need anything to create value within you. You don't need to do something or be something because God made you with that value. Well, married sex is a good thing. It isn't what makes you worthy or valuable or important. Think about it this way. You were made for more than sex. God hasn't made this thing that's far off that one day you have to attain to finally be happy, to finally feel worth. No, God made you with worth knit into your very being. It's not someday. You have that worth and value right now. So here's what this truth means. If you've made bad decisions in your life sexually, you're still worthy. And if you've used sex to validate yourself, you're still worthy. And if you've used sex to prop up a relationship, you are still worthy. And if you've made bad decisions in your sexual integrity, you are still worthy. And maybe you know other people who have also done those things. Maybe you have friends who you're like, yeah, they have made some bad decisions. Well, they are also still worthy. Their value is knit into them. It's made within them. Do you see them that way, like God sees them? Sex cannot increase your value, and it cannot decrease your value, because sex is not where value comes from. I think this is really important, because if you really get this, you can't stop. You can stop chasing sex with your whole life, with your whole being, years of pursuing this thing that won't actually fill you up and make you feel loved. You can stop treating it like a god and stop doing what it says. You can stop obsessing over what happens later and start living into the goodness that God has for you right now, today. On the other hand, if you've made wise choices when it comes to sexuality, if you've chosen to wait, if you've set up good boundaries, if you made decisions today that you can use tomorrow when you're in those tough situations, I got news for you. That does not make you more valuable. That doesn't affect your value. You are valuable already. And while those are good decisions, they're not decisions that define the way that God sees you. God already loves you. God already sees your value and worth because he put it there at the very beginning of your life. Here's what I want you to remember from these 4 weeks of talking about sexuality. It's that God has a plan for you, and he has a plan for sex. And God is good. And so we know his plan is going to be good. And God's plan for you is good because God has the best intentions for you today, and he wants you to make great decisions for your future. And that's why God set up sex the way he did. And that's why God encouraged us to follow his plan for sex. So here's my challenge. I want you to think about David's psalm this week. I want you to carry it with you. I want you to put it somewhere where you'll see it. And when you see it, remember that your worth and value was put into you from the beginning, and you don't need sex or anything else to define that value in you. You are valuable because God made you that way. I think the verse is a powerful reminder that you're valuable and worthy simply because God made you, and nothing, including sex, can make you worth more or less to the one who created you. As you leave here today, my hope is that you'd remember this truth, that God made you on purpose. He made you fearfully and wonderfully. He knit value into your very being, and you matter no matter what.